Well, welcome to the IRF Campaign to Eliminate Blasphemy and Apostasy Laws issue briefing, which is being held as a prelude to the 77th United Nations General Assembly here in New York City. As we experienced yesterday on our walks to mission offices, the city is already preparing, and traffic is really already insane, and we've got barricades all around the streets where we are. So we're excited to be here. Yesterday we met with 3 mission offices, and we have some exciting updates from specific offices to share with you this morning. I am Dr. Christine Sequenzia. I serve both as Policy Director for the National Association of Evangelicals and as co-chair for the International Religious Freedom Campaign to Eliminate Blasphemy and Apostasy Laws. We're gathered today as a multi-faith, multidisciplinary team of international coalition members dedicated to protecting and promoting religious freedom and specifically calling for the repeal of the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy in the 11 nations that currently have the penalty for blasphemy and apostasy. The IRF Charter affirms the right of the freedom of religion and conscience for every person by virtue of his or her humanity, reflecting in the core of his or her dignity and personhood. Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights reiterates this self-evident truth. And we gather here today to denounce the denial of religious freedom to any person, as denying their right also denies their God-given right to live a fully human life and to flourish as a human being. We believe protecting religious freedom equally for all persons and for their respective religious communities is critical to individual human flourishing and the flourishing of faith and the flourishing of nations in the way that it builds resilient, pluralistic communities, affording all the right to be known and exist peacefully in authentic relationship. However, and this is where you come in, courts continue to met out unjustifiably long prison sentences, even death sentences, to individuals for nonviolent, victimless conduct, such as condemning blasphemy or apostasy. We stand in solidarity with hundreds around the world who cannot be here today, in person, but are just as adamant in their stand unequivocally for the right of every individual to choose and express without fear of reprisal their religion or belief, and the death penalty can never be a sanction for apostasy or blasphemy. You see, the truth is, in nations lacking certain religious freedoms, the bold membership of the International Religious Freedom Campaign to eliminate blasphemy and apostasy laws would be forbidden. Today, unfortunately, 11 countries have the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy. These laws embolden non-state actors to encourage mob action and violence, leading to death. We are calling on states with goodwill and those who believe and uphold the dignity of mankind and sanctity of life to support language in the UNGA resolution on extrajudicial executions. As a Christian, I believe it is my calling to stand for the oppressed and speak out for those who are living under grave persecution. The scriptures are filled with examples of mercy for all people. Esther was one such woman who was anointed by God, was able to intercede on behalf of a marginalized group by using her position and power to bring freedom for many. In fact, Christ himself urged, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and to set at liberty those who are oppressed." We see that in Luke 4:18 of the Gospels. Increasingly, though, the multi-faith voices of my esteemed colleagues are raising, are raising to consciousness the true essence of their own holy books, as you'll hear from our next speaker, Soraya Deen, which they interpret also to call for peace, love, mercy, and grace. These are the voices that will truly lead to global human flourishing. I will now hand over to my esteemed colleague, Ms. Soraya Deen. Soraya M. Deen is a lawyer and founder of the Muslim Women Speakers. She is an award-winning international interfaith activist, community organizer, and motivational speaker. She is a passionate defender of dignity and human rights for women of faith. Please, Soraya.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, every one of you here present here, and those of you listening to us from far. In 2021, fellow Sri Lankan, Priyantha Kumara Dearwadana, a 49-year-old father, a husband, a son, was beaten, killed, and later set on fire by a mob in Sialkot, Pakistan. He had been accused of blasphemy for removing a poster featuring religious content. Asia Bibi, in November of 2010, a judge by the name of Muhammad Naveed in Punjab sentenced her to death by hanging, additionally fining her the first woman to be condemned to death in Pakistan for blasphemy charges. And her charge was that, her crime was that she made offensive comments about the Prophet Muhammad. Mubarak Bala, the 37-year-old president of the Humanist Association of Nigeria, he was accused of blaspheming Islam. Miriam Ibrahim, my friends, the list goes on. These curbs perceived as anti-Islamic speech, whether called blasphemy, whether called defamation of Islam or insulting Islam or hate speech, are incompatible with democracy and individual human rights. We are all held hostage, whether you are in the United States or in the Middle East or in Asia. And today I speak to you as a Muslim woman, a minority, and a minority within a minority. It is a difficult task ahead for us. Let us make no mistake about it. And I stand here with some level of courage because I believe to teach is a necessity, to please somebody is sweetness, but to persuade is victory. I have challenged blasphemy laws and these laws for 3 reasons. Dr. King spoke about a blueprint when we are engaged in social justice work. My friends, you know, a blueprint is like a plan to build a village, to build a building, sorry. We need a blueprint. I think that those of us who are working to repeal blasphemy laws, we also need a blueprint. We need to have a firm foundation. For years, we have gone back and forth, back really, not forth, on this issue of repealing blasphemy laws. I stand today to share with you that the 3 components that will be necessary for such a blueprint is that the world must hold the Muslim majority countries that enforce death penalty and other inhuman punishments for blasphemy. We must all come together because we live in a globalized world, and what happens to one affects us all. But in the realm of addressing this issue of blasphemy, I say this in a lighter vein, but with utmost seriousness. It is like a faucet that's leaking. People are just mopping the flow and not addressing the faucet that needs to be leaked, not repairing the faucet. So let us all hold each other accountable, and particularly these countries that are enforcing death penalties on people who they claim have blasphemed religion. And my second blueprint, I think, is that we as Muslims have a special duty and a role to play in this regard. The silent majority must speak up. Because again, I quote Dr. King here, he says, in situations of injustice, if you have chosen to be silent, you are taken the side of the oppressor. So we Muslims have a special mandate to speak up, because we can't participate in this grave injustice of our times. And we have enough scripture and enough scholarship and leadership to tell us that there is a new way forward for us as we interpret our scripture. Because a surah in the Quran clearly states that if you're in a crowd and people are insulting your religion or talking disparagingly about it, just walk away. And it's about time that we call on our religious clergy to teach this to our congregations. Thirdly, this is a fact for every one of us to follow. And that is, there is a huge polarity on this issue of blasphemy. On the one side, the people who propose and who support blasphemy are seeking justice. They believe it is justice for the Lord, for our Creator. They don't want anybody to insult the Creator. So they want justice. They want to punish people who are allegedly insulting their religion. On the other side is people like us, activists, humanitarians, humanists, who are calling to repeal the blasphemy laws. Why? Because we want human rights to thrive. We want freedom of expression. We want universal laws that protect us, not harm us and punish us. So we are seeking justice in another sense. So the polarity is that we are seeking justice in two different ways. And I remind every one of us, particularly to those nations who advance blasphemy laws, what about God's mercy? Have you thought of God's mercy? That is why we are here for, to claim and to proclaim God's mercy. What would God want you to do? Would he want you to kill somebody because somebody said something that you think is insulting? So my call is that the third foundation for this blueprint is that we must all take the road of mercy. We must all walk the road of mercy, not just speak about it on Sundays and Fridays and Saturdays in our places of worship, but we must embody it. We must walk the talk. My friends, let us not forget that every monument of civilization is also the monument of barbarism. So let us remember, as we come together and implore member states in the United Nations to embody this charter where there's language calling for the repeal of blasphemy, that let us also embody within us and call the whole world to take on a new journey, a new path of mercy, and proclaim and reclaim and live God's promise to us, and that is of mercy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those notable words, Soraya. You are an encouragement to us all and a steadfast voice for the Muslim people. Attendees, let me now welcome Kola Alapinni, who is a Nigerian attorney. He is an international human rights lawyer from Nigeria. On behalf of the Foundation for Religious Freedom, they have intervened in blasphemy cases in Nigeria. Amongst notable cases and intervention done are the cases of Omar Farouk Bashir versus the state and Aminu Sharif versus the state, widely reported by over 50 international media organizations. Successfully defended Omar Farouk Bashir, a minor, sentenced to 10 years imprisonment by the Upper Sharia Court, Finland Haki Hasawa, Kanu, northern Nigeria, on religious offenses. The conviction was squashed and the minor was set free by the Appellate Division of the Kanu State High Court on the 21st of January 2021. He successfully defended Aminu Sharif, sentenced to death by hanging by the Upper Sharia Court, Finland Haki Hasawa, Kanu, northern Nigeria region, on religious offenses. The conviction was squashed and the appellate could not be executed. However, a retrial was ordered and the case was remitted to the Upper Sharia Court to be retried by another Islamic judge. They have filed a further appeal to the appeal court challenging this, and it was argued on the 23rd of June, 2022. The court dismissed the appeal by 1 to 2 judges. A further appeal will proceed to the Supreme Court of Nigeria in the coming weeks. Kola, it is a pleasure to serve with you, sir. Please take the stage.
Thank you very much, Christine. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Why are we appealing the constitutionality of blasphemy law? Why did we sign the charter according to the language to be embedded in the UNGA resolution? On the 10th of August 2020, in Kano, northern Nigeria, 2 outrageous sentences were handed down by an upper Sharia court sitting in Feeling Hawk in Kano. Umar Farouk Bashir, a minor, was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, and Yaramin Sharif, a death sentence. Both were for blasphemy. They were charged and arraigned under Section 382, subsection B of the Kano State Sharia Penal Code of 2000. Both of them were sentenced without legal representation, in violation of their constitutional right to a counsel, a further violation of their right to a fair hearing. In September 2020, the Foundation for Religious Freedom filed 2 appeals at the Kano State High Court Appellate Division, challenging both sentences. We challenged the sentences on the grounds of procedural irregularities, lack of legal representation, breaches of constitutional rights to freedom of expression, thought, conscience, and religion. More importantly, we challenged the Sharia law and argued that it is inconsistent with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We observed and cited that Nigeria is in breach of our international obligations under the various treaties and charters we have signed up to. These include, but not limited to, the African Charter, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, etc. In addition, Nigeria is also in breach of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and its own Child Rights Act when it condones the marriage of the former governor, now a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. To remind you, the senator cited his rights under Islamic Sharia law as a defense. On the 21st of January 2021, the court quashed the 10-year sentence of minor and set him free completely. It also quashed the Ya's death sentence, or remitted his case to the upper Sharia court to be tried before another judge. The court, however, dismissed our issue on the incompatibility of the Sharia law as being currently practiced in Nigeria vis-a-vis the Nigerian Constitution. We further appealed to the second highest court in Nigeria for appeal. On the 12th of May, 2022, the Court of Appeal Kano Judicial Division could not sit due to some exigencies. However, as we made our way back to our hotel, something horrible was happening in Sokoto State. A young lady, Deborah Yakubu Sami, was being lynched by our colleagues at the College of Education. Potential trainee students stoned, clubbed, and doused their classmates with petrol and burnt her to death because she challenged them for converting a classroom WhatsApp platform for sharing classwork into a religious one. Our classmates, trainee teachers, murdered their colleague in broad daylight. When the state eventually got round to charging the suspected persons, they were not arraigned for murder. The police said they were only part of the mob. More importantly, they were defended by a team of 34 lawyers, led by a professor of law, in contrast to our 2 pilot cases, which the Foundation for Religious Freedom filed, when the appellants could not get anyone to represent them in the whole of northern Nigeria. Due to the fear of reprisal attacks, the police are apparently still searching for the real killers of Deborah Yakubu Sami. Maybe if we had acted much earlier, challenging the blasphemy laws before our court system in Nigeria and got into the Supreme Court, we would have been able to prevent the gruesome murder of Deborah Yakubu Sami. The fear of religious fundamentalists is so great that a former vice president, now a presidential candidate, was bullied into deleting his tweet condemning the murder of Deborah Yakubu Sami. Finally got to argue that he has appealed on the 23rd of June 2022. On the 17th of August 2022, the Court of Appeal in the judgment of 1-2 dismissed our appeal in Yahya Sharif Aminu versus Kano State and Government of Kano State. We find comfort in the dissenting judgment of the presiding judge of the court, who found in our favor and discharged and acquitted the appellant. His two learned brothers found in favor of the state. The court ruled that the Sharia law is constitutional. More importantly, the Court of Appeal overruled Kano State High Court and held that Section 10 of the Constitution is justiciable. Kano State High Court had said it wasn't justiciable. You essentially cannot sue on those rights. But we'll got that overturned. On the 31st of August 2022, the full judgment of the court was released. We have studied the judgment and we will be filing an appeal to the Supreme Court of Nigeria as soon as I return. We strongly believe that these blasphemy laws are a violation of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the criminal aspects of the Islamic Sharia law cannot hold sway over the Constitution. Nigeria is currently under siege and is facing the greatest battle for its soul. The Constitution is run on and does not support the chopping of limbs for people for theft, stoning people to death for adultery, or the marriage of minors to middle-aged or old men under the guise of a religion. This is the major reason we are challenging the Islamic Sharia law, and more importantly, the so-called blasphemy law in Nigeria. That is why I signed the charter. That is the reason for seeking support and calling for the language to be embedded in the United Nations General Assembly resolutions. We are calling that under no circumstances can the death penalty be applied as a sanction against specific forms of conduct such as apostasy or blasphemy. We also want the UNGA resolution to reflect and ensure that the death penalty be not imposed as a sanction for apostasy and blasphemy or other perceived offenses. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Well, you got to see the UN, but now we're closing the shade so you can see that. Thank you, Kola. Inspiring as usual, and so honored to serve with you and be alongside you in this honorable fight. Let me now introduce another Nigerian brother, human rights activist, Ganiu, who is the founder and executive producer of Unchained Africa, a cultural organization and social enterprise that leverages the power of arts to promote civic education, good governance, human rights, cultural diversity, and the spirit of solidarity in Africa. He was previously the program director of Intro Africa, a cultural organization that advocates against social injustice through the arts. He served as the Nigerian national coordinator and later continental coordinator for Art Watch Africa, which promotes and defends the rights of artists to freedom of expression. Between August 2017 and December 2018, he worked as a program officer for Africa at Free News, a Copenhagen-based international organization defending artistic freedom. An acclaimed artist and activist, he has dedicated his career to advocating and defending artistic freedom of expression in Africa, demanding freedom for artists persecuted for criticizing the government, coordinating emergency assistance for artists at risk, and exerting pressure on the government to reform legislation that hinders artistic freedom. In 2016 and 2017, Ayo worked with major stakeholders in successfully advocating for the Nigerian Copyright Commission to secure the Federal Executive Council's approval of the new copyright bill for the greater protection of artists' intellectual property. He also led the artistic community's collaborative campaign involving the civil society that succeeded in forestalling the passage of the repressive NGO Regulatory Commission bill. Ayo was O'Brien Fellow in Residence at the Center for Human Rights and Legal Pluralism, McGill University in Montreal, Canada in 2019, and a Reagan Faskel Fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, in Washington, D.C., United States in 2020, where he developed the advocacy strategy for enhancing and safeguarding artistic freedom of expression in Africa. He is currently a visiting fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, D.C. And I don't know how he has the time to be here, but we are honored by his presence. Please, sir, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christine. I'm also standing here before you, like Soraya, as a Muslim from Southwest Nigeria, and as an artist. I'm joining the IRF campaign to eliminate blasphemy and apostasy laws on behalf of Unchained Africa, to bring to light how these issues are violating artist freedom of expression in Nigeria in particular, and Africa in general. In June 2021, Islamic singer Ahmed Abdul was detained by the police following a claim by the Kano State Census Board that it had received several complaints about a song titled Barhama Oscar. Barhama is a nickname for Ibrahim in Hausa language and is regularly intended to extol the virtues of an Islamic figure called Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse, a Senegalese Islamic leader of the Nigerian movement, as a man of extraordinary qualities. Some Islamist extremists condemned the song and accused the singer of blasphemy. Blasphemy for what they deemed excessive praise of the Islamic cleric to a level exclusively reserved for Prophet Muhammad. The singer had to apologize while in detention to the Muslim community and the Kano State government before being released on bail. The decision by Ahmed to apologize could not be insulated from the numerous death threats he received from extremists, as well as fears instilled in artists generally in Nigeria by the death sentence earlier pronounced on the young Yahya Sharif Aminu, an aspiring Islamic singer who has not professionally developed a career in music, but improvised with Kola, another nickname for the same Islamic figure, Ibrahim Niasse, as a replacement for Prophet Muhammad in the lyrics of his song. The voice notes led to arguments with some Islamist extremists, which went viral on social media. After a failed mob attempt in which extremists damaged his family home, Yahya was arrested, secretly prosecuted, and sentenced to death for alleged blasphemy in August 2020. Over the years, the existence of blasphemy laws in Nigeria has emboldened extremist groups and attacking artistic expressions. In November 2020, the Inspector General of Police in Nigeria gave a directive for police action. By police action includes arrest or technical arrest by asking an artist not to move, by restricting the freedom of the artist, by masquerading as investigators and others. So in Kaduna State, to prevent alleged violence, after a petition claimed that the images shared on social media by the popular actress Rahama Shadau were responsible for blasphemous comments made against Prophet Muhammad by the followers of the artist. So exploitation of blasphemy laws in Nigeria is not limited to Islamist extremist groups alone. It has empowered clerics from both Islamic and religious faith to violate others' freedom of expression with impunity. In 2017, comedians MC Toothpick, Black Mayor, MC Tutok, and MC Samorano of comedy group known as Nigeria's Busiest were arrested for a parody that portrayed the extent to which members of Lord's Choosing Charismatic Revival Church had become true gullible in their followership of their general overseer, Pastor Lazarus Moka. The impunity of religious leaders in Nigeria is enabled by broadcasting policies and regulations that prohibit casual references to religious symbols. In 2018, the song See Mary, See Jesus by Alapinni, a popular rapper in Nigeria, was banned for being allegedly laced with casual mention of Mary and Jesus, regarded as sacred by the Christian faith, which according to them contravenes section 431E of the Nigerian Broadcasting Code. In view of all these practices, which are enabled by blasphemy law in Nigeria, the space for artistic freedom and creativity has shrunk to its lowest level in Nigeria, and the right of artists to contribute to an open, transparent, and democratic society is under attack. It's against this backdrop that Unchained Africa, my organization, is involved in this advocacy and joins the call for the repeal of blasphemy and apostasy law. Not only are we calling for the repeal of these laws, we are also asking the countries concerned to promote the spirit of religious freedom and protect their citizens' rights against senseless attacks. We believe that this will open up the civic space to holding all leaders, including religious leaders, accountable to the people. To also give citizens the right to exercise their freedom of expression without fear of being lynched by extremists. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of session one. We're going to switch now to a panelist portion. So if you give us just a minute to do some room rearrangement, we'll be right back. Okay, so as you can see, I'm joined here by some amazing activists. And so we're going to just open this up for casual dialogue now. I think what's important to highlight, the reason why in this room, you're not able to see, but behind the shades, is the UN building. And actually they just raised the flags. So it's now the beginning of the day here in New York City, and the UN is gathering for its meetings, and the 77th Annual United Nations General Assembly will commence starting on September 20th, which is the reason why we're here to advocate for the resolution to end the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy in the 11 nations where that currently exists. So we yesterday had the opportunity to meet with the countries of Luxembourg, Canada, and Nigeria. Nigeria happens to be one of the countries currently imposing the death penalty for blasphemy, not apostasy. And so I'm going to hand it over first to someone that you've already heard from today, Kola, who is going to share a little summary of what we experienced in the Nigerian meeting yesterday, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the panelists for their opinions as well. Go ahead, Kola.
Thank you very much. I thought the meeting went very well. One perception was very robust discussions. Issues that I think we're able to put across your points in a very subtle manner, which was quite appreciated. In summary, we get a feel that at the federal level, blasphemy are not being supported, and everyone is happy that the matter is not going to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court policy court and state final statement. I think what we took away yesterday was that.
Try to speak up a little bit so we can hear you.
Okay.
What we took away yesterday was.
Yes, which is quite important. The government of Nigeria would be very uncomfortable if Nigeria goes back on the list of countries of particular concern. US State Department. It shows that they don't like being shamed, and I think that should be the direction that we take away from also the government of Nigerian officials are very apprehensive of the travel ban on key actors, traffic governors in the states where these laws are being members of the family. The fear of not being able to access good health care, wives being able to go shopping abroad, and the kids to be able to go to school in the US, UK, and as countries, that fear is real. So I would say that that's a summary. That's what we took away.
Yeah, we absolutely know the direction to proceed now, and I think we made a few friends in that office as well. So I hope they invite us back again. But it was a very warm meeting, and one that we hope to replicate in the future, both in Nigeria as well as the other 11 or 10 countries currently imposing the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy. Okay, so before we proceed, would you all introduce yourselves to the audience and just share a little bit about why you feel compelled to travel all the way to New York City and advocate in some pretty contentious spaces for human rights and religious freedoms for all people. Let's start with Richard Horowitz.
I'm an attorney. I deal with international matters, and I'm committed to the bar in New York, DC, and I think that this work is important because people all over the world are serving rights and freedom here in the West, and certain atrocities and things occur. People have to do something. Tell us whatever we can to deal with the issue.
Hi, my name is Stephen Kim. I'm a human rights advocate. I'm actually located not too far from New York City. The only thing that I can say about this issue is that this issue has existed for such a long time, and unfortunately, it has been normalized in many societies, in the minds of many government officials. And as a result, the innocent people have become a collateral to the damages that were being done. And so, this, I do feel that this is an ongoing challenge that everyone around the world should be paying attention to. And I'm here and I'm very happy to join it to support the efforts of these great heroes that we have today.
We know you, Kola, so we'll skip to Soraya. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So why am I here? I think extremism that leads to blasphemy or vice versa has pushed the Muslim community to the wall, and we are in a very colorless place. So I want to, because I work at the intersection of religion and human rights, especially women's discrimination, I've seen how religious freedom, claimed religious freedoms have trumped a lot of the abuse of human rights. So I'm here to speak about stand up for the Muslims and to reclaim my faith that blasphemy is wrong, and we Muslims must stand strong and in one voice to our call for the repeal of blasphemy laws from the 12 Muslim majority.
My name is Ayodele Ganiu. I'm an artist, founder. I defend and promote artistic freedom. And artists generally are some of the biggest victims of blasphemy allegations, because I don't recognize blasphemy as something. And somebody's life is currently on the line. We are supporting the legal team led by Kola, Alapinni to defend him up to secret. So I see this as a very wonderful opportunity to have our voice to be called for the blasphemy, especially death penalty.
Good morning. I guess I'm the last here.
Last but not least.
Yeah. Dr. William Devlin, I am here today as an international human rights pastor and humanitarian, and been working in some of these 11 countries since 2001. That was my first trip to Pakistan. I do this full time over the last 10 years, and I travel to a number of these nations that have these blasphemy and apostasy laws, like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and Nigeria, and also formerly Sudan. So I'm here to report briefly on the good news. We always hear a lot of bad news about what's going on, like in the stories of Asiya Bibi and Miriam Yahya Ibrahim. And yet Sudan, at this point, as a Muslim majority country, is actually, when it comes to the repeal of apostasy and blasphemy laws, over the last 3 years since the initial civilian coup and Prime Minister Hamdouk taking over, and now even after the October 2021 military coup, the country is now led by President Mohammed Burhan. The blasphemy and apostasy laws that were repealed 2-3 years ago are still in a repealed status. It's amazing when you look at Sudan. They've been dropped from the special watch list. They've been dropped from the country of particular concern list. So I'm here because I've been working in Sudan since 2006, just to say it can be done. It can be done. And so thankful for Dr. Christine heading this whole effort up, particularly here as we are diving into the UNGA again in 2022. So hope springs eternal. And I hope all of you that are watching will engage in this, this great international battle to repeal blasphemy and apostasy laws in these 11 nations. So thank you, and God bless you, and continue to pray for the repeal of these laws so we can protect more people.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for those words, and thank you for the work that you've done to go before us. I pray that we all have your stamina and perseverance in this fight that's sometimes long and arduous. To that extent, the last time many of us gathered together, we were at the Earth Summit in Washington, D.C. in June of 2022, just a couple months ago. And we were able to share civil society innovative solutions about how to handle many international religious freedom issues. Our campaign on eliminating blasphemy and apostasy laws specifically spoke to this idea of eliminating the death penalty for blasphemy and apostasy. And so that's, again, why we're here at the United Nations in New York City, and the resolutions that we hope many countries can help support. So to that extent, it seems like there is a groundswell of civil society organizations that understand the need for this. And so I guess as we conclude this webinar, the one question I would ask each panelist to share a bit of your opinion on how we can get basically state actors to understand what civil society seems to already get. So anybody who would like to comment on that, please feel free. It doesn't have to be in order. So anybody who feels led to share how best we can encourage states to support this issue. Even in some of the cases with staffers that we spoke to yesterday, countries who may understand and like what we're pushing feel like they don't want to sign on because it would decrease other efforts that they have. So if you would share a little bit about how to embolden, why states should feel emboldened to continue to support this, regardless of other efforts.
I'll jump in and say, related to Sudan, Sudan wanted to become a member and a player on the world stage. They didn't want to be regarded as an outlier nation. And so after years of lobbying, you could say, or appealing probably would be a better word, appeal to repeal. And it happened because Sudan and its government said, look, we want to come into the 21st century. We don't want to be perceived as a backward nation that we're killing people and pronouncing the death penalty just because you want to change your faith. or you want to be outspoken about your faith. And so if we can do it in Sudan, we can do it in many other countries, but it takes resolve, it takes resilience to add another R, to get the repeal. So those that are watching, if you work in these countries, then you have a responsibility, or if you are a citizen of that country, much as Soraya has done a lot of work in her nation, you need to be active and jump in.
I want to add, thank you, Reverend David. I think something that as a community organizer, we believe that the bridge between the politicians who are ruling and the people is the lack of power. So people need to build power. And in our work as the community organizers, we define power as the ability to get things done. So the issue of blasphemy is huge. Like according to Reverend Devlin in Sudan, the government woke, but other countries' government, I doubt will ever wake up, because they need these laws to solidify and stay in power, to put fear to the people. So in such situations, people have to wake up, and people have to organize between themselves and build community and demand some change from the government. Because what is lacking is the power to do that. Blasphemy is a huge issue. It has served corrupt politicians. It has served corrupt regimes. It continues to serve dictatorial leaders. So people's voices need to be heard, and we need to organize. Mobilizing alone is not enough. We need to organize. Organizing is taking steps, taking action, and building powerful relationships so that we bring together people who think like us and agitate and question our government. That is highly critical if you have to mobilize your leaders. But it can also be done from many fronts. As a Muslim, I know this from. I work in Muslim majority countries. I travel to Nigeria, Bangladesh, I work in Sri Lanka, we work in Uganda. We know where the problem lies, and we believe that clergy mobilization is critical. People of faith engaging clergy is a critical, powerful way to begin this work, where clergy, they preach the real story of love and unity and mercy of God, because they have captive audience. And then again, as a women's rights activist, I believe that we need new stakeholders, and that is engaging and empowering more women in the religious space. Thank you.
I love the word you use, agitate. When you think about it, that's what washing machines do. They agitate, right? And what happens as a result of the agitation? You get clean clothes. So those of us who are working on the repealing of apostasy and blasphemy laws led by Dr. Christine, we have to be agitators. We can be nice and kind and loving like you all were yesterday, and today you will be in other days here at the UN. We have a passion to agitate in order to clean this up. So let's be washing machines.
Yeah, in the washing machine, you need good softener, you need good soap. So we need supporters, we need partners, And I think the Western world has a special mandate because we need to support states, and we need to support people, community organizers, activists like us who are on the ground, putting our life online to the business.
I think I have a message in different contexts for different stakeholders. First, I want to start with these countries which they have this law. Unfortunately, Europe, which my country is. Let us see blasphemy as a danger, because it's an issue that has to do with spirituality. So why don't we leave spirituality to God? Why we know it's obvious from some of the engagement we had that these things are political. Politicians even make promises to electorate to implement some religious laws just to impress. The danger they do without the sincerity to do it, which out of not for sincerity of purpose, but to win elections. So, and this happens in many countries. So why don't we look at our country? Because these are things that are difficult to change when you get to power. Because we have now emboldened those people to be supported, and it becomes so difficult. And these are things that can lead to war. For instance, the multicultural environment like Nigeria, I think that can lead to war when it becomes so difficult to tackle these issues. So I want to appeal to these countries to be sincere, to see their countries, to reflect on the dangers for the future of the countries, and to the Western world, to powerful democracies. We profess democracy. It's important to make that democracy, the values and the principles, to be the overriding goal of our engagement with countries. If we have influences over certain countries that are implementing laws that are direct opposite to democratic values, regardless of the benefit we want to enjoy in maintaining that bilateralism, we should ensure we use our influence and powers to get them to repeal these laws. Because at the end of the day, the world becomes more dangerous.
Yeah. The war becomes more dangerous, absolutely. Mr. Kim, I'd like to put you on the spot a little bit. You were in one of our meetings yesterday where we were with an ally who mentioned that it may or may not be too late for the language to be inserted. Of course, we advocated otherwise and mentioned that when this language comes up, we would appreciate their support. Can you help us understand why it might be difficult for them to make that decision and maybe your combative measures to that?
Well, I certainly do believe that all of these countries have agendas of their own. And as we all know, every single nation looks for what's going to benefit them at the end, right? And that's something that we must remember. And I think when I heard that, one thing that did came into my mind was, well, this at the end of the day is going to be a long battle. And it's a long battle because we are dealing with entities and even these ideas of that impact our society greatly. So spirituality, for example, it's something that's heavily it has a heavy presence in the lives of the people, especially in a place like Nigeria. And with that, what comes is the definition of one's spirituality and implementation of one's spirituality on himself or on his society and such. So looking at that, once that normalizes, it becomes a sovereign issue within a nation, unfortunately. And so because of such normalization, I think a lot of countries may be hesitant to get involved, because the next question that I would even say that the situation that they do not want to be in, a situation where they're asked, well, why are you violating our own sovereignty? This is an issue within our own country, and you have no right to call us out for it. They don't want to be in that situation. Despite the fact that all these countries are supposed to become civilized and care for human rights. But then again, there's also different definitions of human rights that these tyrannical countries have a lot of times, right? So, that's why I do think it's going to be a bit of a long battle, but it is a battle that's worth fighting for. With all these brave individuals coming out and saying, look, this is wrong, and we want you to stand with us no matter what the stakes are. And as for the combative solutions, I think one of the only things that we can do as people in the West and folks within the free world is to keep on urging your government officials, your representatives, to take action. I mean, it's sometimes you'll get no answer, but as we push on further and further and further, there will be some type of result that I believe will benefit at least a portion of the society that we are fighting for. we've seen this happen with Timor-Leste. Years ago, people have fought for the independence of Timor-Leste and their freedom. And lo and behold, they became one of the first independent countries within the 21st century, something that people thought that was impossible. But we can make it happen. So going back to what those representatives say, I mean, that has been the reality since the beginning of time, but that does not mean that that what we're trying to achieve is impossible. So I think that's something that everyone should remember.
I want to quickly comment on some of the issues. I wish we had the opportunity to also engage some of our African countries that do not have to engage with Nigeria, Somalia, Mauritania, to see that we are all signatories to that chapter. We spoke about it yesterday. That Article 8 guarantees that and kicks against everything that has to do with some of the things that have been taken. So it's a responsibility. This law is also domesticated most of the African Charter for people's, for human and people's rights is a law in Nigeria and many other countries. Why don't we engage ourselves? If you are not a signatory, you are, especially those who are not on this level, they have a lot of South Africa. I'm not sure Egypt is not, but not even have a death penalty.
And related to that, in real time, just in the last month, we saw the almost
and I'm very excited
murder
about the Sudan.
Yeah, you look at Salman Rushdie. What happened? There he is speaking at the Chautauqua conference in Western New York, and he's had a fatwa against him for, I think it's over 30 years. And there he was about to give a speech, and someone motivated by hatred, because he's Salman Rushdie in his books and public lectures has been accused of blasphemy and apostasy. And, that fatwa was almost carried out. And so, Soraya, you said earlier about the responsibility of clergy, and it is our responsibility of clergy to speak in behalf of God's mercy and also speak in behalf of what the UN says in the Declaration of Human Rights in Article 18. So we hope that these repeals of all these laws will move forward.
And let me just jump in for 1 second. It's a lot of times there are great clergy out there that are part of the silent majority, and they're part of the silent majority because they're always surrounded by fear. And this is what tyrannical governments do a lot of times. They weaponize fear and societal repression in order to get them to sort of bend them towards that will. I mean, we've seen this happen to the church in China, right? We've seen this happen to multiple religious organizations around the world. And so I think this is probably, I think it's safe to say that we are probably at a crossroads where we can actually empower those clergy all around the world, particularly in places like Nigeria, where they can come and speak out. I would love to see a day where an imam and a Christian pastor, or priest, whatever it may be, sort of stand together and say, maybe it's our time to talk to our communities, right? And tell them that peace is actually possible. And to come up with something that is viable for our community. I mean, we haven't really seen too much of that. And I think it is our job to help empower those individuals to come out as much as we can. And just like what Soraya said, and it is critical that we keep up the fight, because if those leaders see that the fight is ongoing, I believe that they'll be more motivated to act in the future.
Absolutely.
That's very important.
Mr. Horowitz, I understand that we're flanked now by wisdom at this table, and we'd like to hear from you. In your role, you've been at this for quite some time as a man of faith, a Jewish man of faith, and an attorney here in New York City. admitted to the bar. Will you give us a little perspective, maybe from your people group and your work?
Yeah, well, I wanted to pick up on what some of the panelists said regarding agitation and engaging with countries that subscribe to the view that that penalty should be applied. And there's a somewhat legal question here. Who has the burden of proving what to the countries who are against it have the burden of proving why it's wrong, or the countries who are in favor of it have the burden of proving why it's right? And I think it's clear that world opinion, government policy that is fundamentally against it. In fact, if 11 or 12 countries, 11 countries in the OIC practice this, that means 80% of OIC countries don't practice it. So it's clear that public opinion and world opinion is against it. And I'd like to quote something from the U.S. Declaration of Independence, written in 1776. Thomas Jefferson says, when one people want to dissolve the political bonds with another, he wrote, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So when it comes to such a fundamental and important global issue, and if you're doing what you're doing, you've got to explain it to the rest of the world out of a decent respect to the opinions of mankind. So I think when engaging with the countries who practice this, the strategy should be, burden is not on the countries who are against it to press upon those other countries who are in favor. I think the strategy should be to demand that the countries who are in favor justify why they're doing what they're doing in light of the fact that most world opinion, the overwhelming majority of the OIC countries are against it. And I think that should be a strategy that should be perhaps adopted or given consideration when we're talking about how to engage this battle or this agitation.
And I also think the larger issue of blasphemy is dependent on several other layers. It begins in a benign way of, you know what, don't insult my God, don't talk anything disparaging, don't say anything that I don't agree. You know, it's not even the disparaging that we're talking about. What I don't agree is offensive to me. So do not say. And what is happening is these countries, these nations, and these communities, they want to really undermine our freedom to express, you know, and then to legitimize it. We have to be very careful in the West. As Reverend Devlin said, if Salman Rushdie can be attacked the way he was in New York, we can do it as we walk out. You know? So this is very dangerous and this is very serious. People have to, leaders of other nations who have repealed the blasphemy laws, who don't have blasphemy laws, they have to build a comradeship with the countries that are having the blasphemy laws and educate them, engage them, because this is a very serious violation of fundamental human rights.
Right, and I think that's one of the main reasons why we're here in New York City, to build relationships, radical relationships, both allies and those who might have an opposition to what we're presenting here today. So with that, I'd like to wrap up this briefing by thanking everyone. Oh, would you like to say something? Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say that religious offenses laws are clear and present dangers and not be underestimated. If a 30-year fatwa, for instance, I'm actually still in sort of parliament, you know, at the Luxembourg permanent mission is asking is there or to escape. So it's too late to escape because we've already plunged ourselves into it. Everyone knows it is a potential target. It is extremes whether we like it or not. So, and you ask specifically what can be done, what can we do? I would say we can leverage the use of new technologies. Ironically, it was the use of new technologies that got Osama killed, because WhatsApp was what led to our death, so to speak. The classroom platform had been hijacked by Islamic extremists, various students. The platform that was supposed to be used for sharing coursework was being used to propagate a certain religion. She spoke out against it, and she got lynched. Burned students stoned, burned by her classmates. Also, our clients there have been Sharif. What led to him getting the death penalty was the song which is shared on WhatsApp, and you can find the CNN report here. WhatsApp that led to death. This is found the blasphemy. I'm saying that. However, the most international support which we got for our challenges against this was from the use of new technologies. Twitter. Nigeria was so scared of Twitter. Twitter got banned for over a year or so.
And he used Twitter to ban.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost 1 year, 11 months.
You're very correct. So you can see the fear of the usage of new technologies is real to oppressive governments. We also it's during the revolution in North Africa. Tunisia, Nigeria, and all those places. Egypt, led to the Arab Spring. And this is very important because we used it effectively. We're a low budget organization. We had to keep a low profile and keep our eyes low. But the whole world heard our voice through Twitter, through LinkedIn, through Facebook. We just kept on spreading the news and tagging big international news organizations until they came to our rescue. And of course, that started embarrassing the government. Everybody had to sit up. Religion is a tool of social and political control. And the judges said so in our first appeal when we were challenging the constitutionality of the Sharia law and said Sharia law is here to stay. We're using it to control the populace. Essentially, that's what the judgment said. So we need these laws in place to control. Otherwise, there will be social breakdown. It is in the judgment of the first appeal. It's there, black and white. So, that's confirmation that that's what these religious laws are for, nothing else. It's instrumental to point out to you that politicians and big men don't get caught by these religious laws. These religious laws only catch 4 people. I've never seen any big politician or whatever being taken before Sharia courts. And, there you go. What else can we do? The use of international advocacy. You are friends out here, all coming to our rescue. International Earth Summit is very important. We saw the peace pact signed by various clergies, and even the Sultan of Sokoto sent its representative. So that was a very powerful moment to see the representative of the Sultan and representative of the Anglican government of Nigeria. That the president of the Christian Association of Nigeria was there, and they all signed the pact of peace. With such international collaborations can be built upon. In addition, what we know how to do best is to use the legal challenge, to challenge this law. And we're hoping, to get a favorable response at the Supreme Court. If we don't, we will use, there's still an avenue for us internationally to use the regional courts. International law will come to our aid. Nigeria is a big player in the African scene. We are one of the original signers of the African Charter. We have the ECOWAS court situated in Abuja in Nigeria. They came to our rescue during the Twitter ban. I was part of the company, part of the team. Yes, we appeared and he ruled against the Nigerian government. We also can use Parliament. Hopefully, if friendly Parliament is in place, not understand Parliament can be lobbied to change the language of these laws. They are especially in our country, where we think they're inconsistent with our obligations internationally. We have signed international treaties and documents. They are binding. Yes. The African Charter is binding on us. The SCPR is binding on us. The Child Rights Convention It's binding us. We domesticated the Child Rights Convention, where, for instance, it's been said that the child is anyone under 18. So it cannot coexist with religious laws that allows a middle-aged man or an old man to marry a 13-year-old girl. They are inconsistent. Our obligations under international law conflict, and where international law and domestic law conflicts, international law will always reign supreme. So we're in for the long haul. It's not over yet. And this is the beauty of international human rights law, because once you depose to these treaties, it doesn't end at the Supreme Court of Nigeria. In fact, what they want to see is that you've exhausted domestic remedies before coming to the international arrangement.
We shouldn't.
Will you close this out with the final statement?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to buttress on that point that we shouldn't be bothered about the propaganda of sovereignty, just mere propaganda. Because people who are claiming to be sovereign are oppressing the majority of people. So, and when they are parties and signatories to international conventions, international treaties, and in some other cases, both international and also domesticated.
And if I can chip in, there's an authority on that, Foreign versus Apache. Okay. When we had a military despot in Nigeria in the 90s, whatever the military takes over power, they suspend the constitution, particularly parts that have to do with fundamental rights, Chapter 4. So, Chief Kanfari went to court and said, hey, these rights are being breached and everything. And the court said, oh, they suspended the constitution and everything. And we reminded the court that, look, we signed the African Charter. So the African Charter, even though you suspended the constitution, we signed up to it and should uphold it. So you want
the African Charter has not been suspended.
Just if you can suspend your constitution, but you cannot suspend international law.
So I think we shouldn't be discouraged by the propaganda of sovereignty.
We're just starting, Christine. We're just starting. So these are exciting times ahead.
Let the coffee be strong.
Yeah. and I, I'm a woman and I'm a mother, so I won't have the last word.
Of course.
My kids are so big, I don't get that word anymore. So I think Christine and panel and people who are listening to us in this room and from far, we don't care. That's the bottom line. Enough of us must learn to care. I remember I was working on the mayor's task force for homelessness, and I met a woman who got a house, and I asked her what she felt about it, and she said, I won't be raped from today. Yeah, that was a defining moment in my work. Since then, I could not look at a homeless person and not think about their safety and what life must be like that for them. So the question here is, enough of people need to begin to care. Think of the Asya babies, think of the Priyanta Kumaras, think of the Balas, think of the Miriams, think of the Vibras. Yes, it could be you. So please, let us begin to care about this planet. And I want to finish with Muhammad Ali, who said, service is the rent we pay to live on this planet. So let us serve humanity and let us uphold our human rights. And God doesn't need us to kill on his behalf. It's as simple as that. That is common sense. He is larger than us, you know. He doesn't want me to kill my brother to defend him. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists who were able to join us today. Around the Plaza. I would like to wrap up this briefing by thanking you for your time and thanking you for attending this briefing today. I'm always moved by the boldness of my colleagues for standing for the fundamentals of what the United Nations itself was built upon, often in hostile environments, and still finding allies across both culture and belief, as you see represented in our panelists today, because they know that freedom of conscience and belief are not exclusive rights. They belong to each and every individual. And repealing the death penalty for apostasy and blasphemy is significant in its step in recognizing this call. At this meeting, civil society has shown clear and broad support for the proposed language for the UNGA resolution on extrajudicial killings, why it is important, and why state actors should be in support, such as for my fellow co-chair, Sheikh Makhtar from Mauritania, whose story you heard earlier. This language is feasible and necessary, and we believe that peace is possible. Thank you so much for attending.